Vâng, thêm một tràng vỗ tay thật lớn nữa.
Thank you. Can we have even allow the round of applause for Dr. Alexander Tu and the researchers? Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Alex Tu and the lyricist has brought to us very impressive performance, which pretty much carry the core values of occupational therapy. It starts with everyday activities to optimize life for every individual. Occupational therapy has been around for more than 100 years in the world. However, in Vietnam, it only started to develop for the past few years. We have achieved one of the very first milestones and certain remarkable big steps. So this is the very reason of this conference today. The Occupational Therapy Conference 2023 is here to share with you the latest knowledge, to connect stakeholders, to offer networking opportunities between researchers, professors, practitioners in Vietnam and other countries, so that together we can contribute to the development of occupational therapy in Vietnam in the future. The OT Conference 2023 is organized by the University of Medicine and Pharmacy of Ho Chi Minh City, the Med School of Hải Dương, together with MCNV, with the support of USAID. We're going to have many insightful and interesting presentations from international experts today. We're also going to have the very important participation of the World Union for Occupational Therapy, which is a very important organization who advocates for OT and plays a crucial role in the development of OT in the world and now in Vietnam in particular. This is an amazing opportunity for all of us, and we really hope that today will be fruitful for you in your career. We'd like to introduce the distinguished guest today. And first of all, please welcome Mr. Phạm Ngọc Bằng from the Division of Science and Technology and Training, Ministry of Health. Ms. Nguyễn Phương Hiền from the Division of Higher Education, Ministry of Education and Training. Mr. Trần Đức Hùng from the National Center for Action Against Chemical Poisons and Environment for the Ministry of Defense. From our international partners, Ms. Lê Hà Vân, Head of the Department for Support of the Vulnerable and Connection and Community Inclusivity of USAID. Mr. Didier Demey from the HI organization. Mr. Didier is joining us online today. Please welcome Ms. Wishel Hadley from Humanity and Inclusion Organization. From the University of Medicine and Pharmacy, Ho Chi Minh City, our pleasure to introduce to you Associate Professor Dr. Ngô Quốc Đạt, our Vice Principal, Professor Dr. Nguyễn Văn Chính, the Dean of Nursing Department, UMP. And from the World OT Union, please welcome Ms. Samantha Shann, President. Please welcome Professor Dr. Lynette Mackenzie from the Department of Occupational Therapy, Sydney University, and also the Editor-in-Chief for the OT International Journal, Professor Dr. Anne Kusik, the former Dean of OT Department, Sydney University, and former Editor-in-Chief of Australia OT Journal. Associate Professor Dr. Shravan Saha, Department of Occupational Therapy, Manipal University, India. Dr. C.D. D.A., Director for Planning and Development of the World OT Union. From our conference organizing partners, please welcome Dr. Phạm Thị Cẩm Hưng, Vice Principal from the University of Medical Technology Hải Dương. Mr. Phạm Dũng, Country Director of MCNV, the Netherlands program in Vietnam. From stakeholders, Associate Professor Dr. Trần Trọng Hải, President of the Vietnam Rehabilitation Association. Mr. Trần Văn Dân, President of the Physiotherapy Association of Vietnam. Also, please welcome the officers from the Department of Health of different provinces in Vietnam, Dr. Lê Quang Hùng from Bình Định Department of Health, Dr. Lâm Hà Chi, Vice Director, Quảng Trị Province Department of Health. Together with the representatives from the Departments of Health of Huế Province, Quảng Nam, and Kon Tum Province. Please welcome them. We also are honored to welcome our colleagues from the hospitals in Ho Chi Minh cities, Dr. Đỗ Trọng Ánh, Managing Director of the Orthopedics and Rehabilitation Hospital of Ho Chi Minh City, Dr. Hồ Hải Trường Giang, Director of An Bình Hospital, Associate Professor Dr. Lương Tuấn Khanh, Director for the Rehabilitation Center of Bach Mai Hospital, Hanoi. Please welcome Associate Professor Dr. Nguyễn Thị Kim Liên, the Chief for Rehabilitation of Việt Đức Hospital, Hanoi. And please welcome to all of you, more than 200 delegates joining us here in person. And we have another 300 delegates joining us virtually via our online platform from the universities, colleges, health organizations, hospitals, and other health centers in Ho Chi Minh City and other provinces in Vietnam. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, OT has been growing very strongly in Vietnam in the past few years. And for our key stakeholders, for the practitioners of OTs, we've been brewing this idea for a long time and really looking forward to having this conference, which will be a very important milestone for the development of OT in Vietnam. And I hope that you're sharing the excitement with us here today. This is the very first time we're having an international conference in Vietnam on occupational therapy, and we're extremely fortunate to have the participant, to have the support of all of you, our partners, our collaborators, and the stakeholders in Vietnam and the world. And to begin our conference, we would like to welcome an opening remark from Associate Professor Dr. Ngô Quất Đạt, Vice Principal of the University of Medicine and Pharmacy, Ho Chi Minh City.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, distinguished guests. First of all, on behalf of our University of Medicine and Pharmacy at Ho Chi Minh City, I would like to warmly welcome you to our university and Ho Chi Minh City as well for attending the Occupational Therapy Conference 2023 will be held in our university. I would deliver my small talk to welcome the conference. So I would deliver in Vietnamese. So I would ask Ms. Isa to translate my talk into English. Thank you so much. Kính thưa quý vị đại biểu.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, the delegates from the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education and Training, Department of National Defense. Thank you for joining us in the conference today. Dear one of the delegates, as the representative and sponsor from international organizations. Dear Ms. Lê Hà Vân, the head of the support for vulnerable groups, the Remediations and Inclusion Development Department of USAID, and honor of the delegates, distinguished guest, the representative from Humanity and Inclusion. Regarding the World Federation of Occupational Therapists and international experts, I'd like to warmly welcome Dr. Samantha Shann, Chairman of WFOT, and the professors and representatives from other countries from the Professional Association in Occupational Therapy. Regarding the implementing partners who support us in the organization of the event, I would like to warmly welcome Dr. Phạm Thị Cẩm Hưng, Vice Rector in charge of Hải Dương Medical Technical University. Warmly welcome to Dr. Phạm Dũng, Country Director of Vietnam Netherlands Medical Committee, MCNV. Regarding the representative from professional organization, I would like to warmly welcome People's Dr. Trần Trọng Hải, Chairman of the Vietnam Physiotherapy Association. Warmly welcome to Dr. Trần Văn Dần, the Chairman of the Vietnam Physiotherapy Association. And dear honor of the distinguished guests, our representative from Department of Health of different provinces and from the hospitals. And honor the training and practice facilities who are the training facilities and partners of our occupational therapy training program. And dear honor of the guests who join us today in person in this auditorium, as well as the online participants via Zoom platform. And dear honor of the faculties from our team. First of all, on behalf of Ho Chi Minh UMP, it's a big honor for us to collaborate and to co-organize a scientific conference for a very quite old history profession in the world, but very new to our context here in Vietnam, occupational therapy. So to Ho Chi Minh UMP, we have 76 years of experience in establishment and development in higher education trainings. We provide different trainings at different levels at 7 different departments of faculty, and we have more than 160 postgraduate training programs. And we are one of the leading universities in Vietnam providing healthcare courses and trainings in the south of Vietnam. And the reason why I mentioned that is because our role plays an important role in training high-quality healthcare workforce to serve the healthcare demands of the whole country. Regarding the perspective and opinion of our Vietnam government party and parliament in terms of healthcare services, in the past, we see that we focus a lot on treatment. However, with a growing aging population in Vietnam, we have up to nearly 100 million people at this point. We are in the golden point of population. However, in the upcoming time, the population model will change. And therefore, the Vietnam party and government has already provided the directions in enhancement, in prevention, not only treatment, but prevention of diseases and through rehabilitation services for the community and populations to return to normal life. And we are lucky when we look back to the point of time in 2016, thanks to the support from MCNV and the leadership and the support from Humanity and Inclusion and USAID, we organized and implemented the first training course on occupational therapy at bachelor level. And at that point, as you might have known, we had a team of 21 occupational therapists. And after 4 years of training, we got a very successful cohort as the first occupational therapist in Vietnam. And with that support, we have completed successfully the first training. And from the perspective of the leadership board of the university, when we reflect on our journey, we recognize that this training is very important and it contributes to our mission in training the healthcare workforce. And to continue that success in 2020, we organized a second cohort of occupational therapy. And thanks to the collaboration and support from international organizations, we have sent to Manipur University in India. We sent 2 more faculty to join the training there. And in June 2022, last year, they returned to our campus. And this is an invaluable asset of human resources for us to develop more training and research on occupational therapy. And today, with the support from domestic and international organizations, Ho Chi Minh University of Medicine and Pharmacy, it's an honor for us to host the first scientific conference on occupational therapy in our campus. And we are honored and pleased to invite many professors, the experts in occupational therapy field, and particularly we have the chairman of WFOT, and this is a great honor for our team. And also a milestone to mark the maturity of occupational therapy profession in Vietnam. And I hope that given that movement and momentum, with a very young, talented, and dynamic team in Rehabilitation Department under the leadership of Dr. Nguyễn Văn Trinh, the head of Nursing and Medical Technology Department, we will continue our work not only in training, but also in scientific research, so that we can develop a strong foundation for occupational therapy in Vietnam and to contribute a high-quality workforce for Vietnam population. And therefore, once again, on behalf of the UMP, I'd like to congratulate all of you, and I wish us a successful scientific conference, a fruitful day, and a cozy morning so that we can connect and share knowledge with each other. And once again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Associate Professor Dr. Ngô Quốc Đạt, Vice Rector of University of Medicine and Pharmacy, Ho Chi Minh City. Ladies and gentlemen, in recent years, USAID is one of the very active international organizations that have contributed a lot into the development of OT in Vietnam. Today, our conference has been sponsored by USAID via the ground operation of MCNV, and we would like to invite Ms. Lê Hà Vân, the head of support for vulnerable groups, Department of Healing and Inclusive Development, to say a few words with the conference. Ms. Vân, please. Good morning, distinguished guests, professors, students, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Today, I am feeling very emotional as I recall 8 years ago, for the first time when USAID, MCNV, and HI worked together. And for many of you in the room, 8 years ago, we met for the very first time and started the initial discussion about developing occupational therapy in Vietnam. And there was a lot of difficulties. There was like meetings that went on to the middle of the night. There was conference calls, phone calls that we had to stop in the middle or did not lead to anywhere, and a lot of struggles because we could not reach an agreement. And there was a lot of sacrifices for people who had to leave the country to go abroad and study, to be away from their families for the training. And today we have more than 50 very first bachelor degree holders in occupational therapy in Vietnam, the very first OTs of Vietnam. And now we have more than 100 students still studying, taking training in our OT programs here. And that is the result of a lot of efforts, a lot of hard work from all the stakeholders, USAID, MCNV, the University of Medicine and Pharmacy in Ho Chi Minh City, and other universities who have joined our programs in the last few years. I still remember very vividly the very first meeting that we had with the former president of WFOT, and we said that we quoted this: if we want to go fast, we go alone, but if we want to go far, we have to go together. And today, what it shows here at this conference is that we are committed to go together. Right now in the room, we have more than 200 delegates, including students, including our colleagues from other universities. We are going together. We are joining hands to develop occupational therapy in Vietnam. And we are playing a part to innovate, to upgrade rehabilitation in Vietnam so that we can bridge the gaps between what we have now in Vietnam and the best practices in the world, so that we can help more people, we can help more patients and even ourselves. Because as we age, as we become older, occupational therapy is something that helps us stay active and engaged and inclusive in life in general. Well, I'm an action kind of person. I love action movies, so I like to keep it short every time I give a speech. I would like to give back time so that we can make the best of this conference together. This is the very first large-scale international conference on OT in Vietnam. So I wish you all the best of success. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Lê Hà Vân, on behalf of USAID here with us. Ladies and gentlemen, as we accompany the training institutions, other facilities and stakeholders, the Department of Science, Technology and Training of our MOH plays a very important role in the policy making in order to enhance services and improve the quality of rehab practices in Vietnam in general. So we're pleased to have a representative from this government agency under MOH. We'd like to invite on stage Mr. Phạm Ngọc Bằng, Department of Science, Technology and Training, Ministry of Health, to say a few words.
Good morning, Associate Professor Dr. Ngô Quốc Đạt, Vice Rector of Ho Chi Minh UMP, dear Ms. Lê Hà Vân, representative from USAID, dear Dr. Samantha Shann, Chairman of WFOT, dear People's Dr. Trần Trọng Hải, Chairman of the Vietnam Physiotherapy Association, dear one of the international distinguished guests and national experts and colleagues. Under the leadership and guidance from the Ministry of Health and the Department of Science, Technology and Training, it's an honor for me to be here today to join you in the first ever scientific conference on occupational therapy. I'd like to express my sincere appreciation and would like to send my best wishes to one of you and wish all of us a successful event. Ladies and gentlemen, on 24th of May 2023, the Prime Minister of Vietnam has issued a decision number 5649 to officially provide the approval for rehabilitation amendment and implementation plan 2023. And in that important document, we emphasize the importance of rehabilitation. In the upcoming time, we have to adapt and accommodate rehabilitation services of Vietnam to meet the health demands of Vietnam populations and to keep up with the pace of other nearby countries. And the national target of our country is to meet the requirement of the minimal workforce in rehabilitation, 0.5 per 1,000 people. And we aim to complete the title in the professions and to complete the rehabilitation teams with different roles: occupational therapy, speech therapy, physiotherapy, and rehabilitation doctor. Development and completions of the titles and the job descriptions in different roles in the healthcare team in rehabilitation in Vietnam. However, at this point, we have seen gaps in rehabilitation workforce demands. especially the number of bachelor in rehabilitation based on the Ministry of Health report in 2021. At this point, the ratio of rehabilitation team among the population is only 1.25 per 50,000 people throughout the country. It means that the Ministry of Health hasn't yet met the requirements in providing necessary rehabilitation workforce for the population's health needs. And we are implementing and improving the training in occupational therapy, speech therapy, and physiotherapy as other countries are doing. And based on, to our understanding, in Vietnam, we haven't yet had any official training facility in Bachelor of Rehabilitation. And Ho Chi Minh UMP is the only campus in Vietnam that provides the master program in physiotherapy. And throughout the country, we have a very humble number of graduates or students in rehabilitation. In 2020, we only had a graduate cohort of 307 graduates. And given that number, we only achieve a very small fraction of the target set for us in rehabilitation workforce. And with the assignments delivered by the Prime Minister of the country in terms of completion of the workforce, the healthcare workforce for Vietnam, we set this as one of the top priority goals, and we commit to continue to strive to provide more training and to provide more high quality rehabilitation workforce. And based on the current update, the Ministry of Health is completing and developing more and more governmental documents with the synthesis of all of the lessons learned, the experience from other countries. And we will amend again on the regulation for rehabilitation services in Vietnam. And we consider that as very crucial task that we have to complete. And in the scientific conference this year on occupational therapy, we welcome the international experts from different countries and around Vietnam. And the Department of Science, Technology, and Training of the Ministry of Health, we greatly welcome the organization of these professional events, as well as a foundation for us to complete the regulations in rehabilitation field. And hopefully we can gain a shared vision which contribute to the development of rehabilitation workforce in the near future. And finally, on behalf of the Ministry of Health, Department of Science, Technology, and Training, we commit to collaborate with you and to put more effort in development of rehabilitation and its relevant professionals within the scope of rehabilitation services in Vietnam. And finally, we wish you all best wishes and a successful event. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Phạm Ngọc Bằng, on behalf of Science, Technology, and Training Division of MOH. Ladies and gentlemen, the World Federation for OT is the highest and the voice for OT in the world. WFOT is also the organization who established the standards, regulations, and best practices for OT. Vietnam has been very fortunate to always have the support of WFOT, and today we're pleased to welcome the President of the World Federation of OT, Ms. Samantha Shann. So please welcome her on stage to deliver her remarks.
Xin chào, good morning. I apologize that I have no Vietnamese, but I am very, very excited to be here in Vietnam. This is my first visit here, so thank you for the very warm welcome. Representatives from the Ministry of Health, Mr. Pham Ngoc Bang, representatives of Ministry of Education and Training, Mr. Myang Pyo Hain, representatives from USAID, Humanity Inclusion, and MCNV. and also the Vice Director of the University of Medicine and Pharmacy, Professor Noor Wagda. Thank you. Invited and distinguished guests, to the Congress organisers, to all the key stakeholders here with us today, to the occupational therapists and the occupational therapy students, to those joining us in person and to those joining online. Thank you for your support. On this momentous occasion of the first Occupational Therapy Conference in Vietnam, I bring you greetings and best wishes from the World Federation of Occupational Therapists, from the WFOT Executive, and from our 107 member organisations. As President of WFOT, but also personally, I have followed the development of occupational therapy in Vietnam, and I've always been impressed and inspired by your dedication and commitment. Journeys like these are never simple or easy, and they are always full of many challenges. However, through teamwork and working together, we can see what is impossible. And today, we really see that possibility come to reality. Thank you to all who have been part of developing occupational therapy in Vietnam, to the support of the universities, to all of the donors, to all the hospitals and government departments, to the other professions, especially the Physiotherapy Association, to the pioneers of occupational therapy here in Vietnam. Thank you for your amazing and dedicated inspiration and leadership. I know in the coming years, and continue working with the World Federation, we will see Vietnam join that international family of occupational therapists with the formation of the National Association and the international recognition of your occupational therapy education programs. So much has been achieved already, and congratulations to all the occupational therapists and students in Vietnam. Thank you for making a difference. I am proud and delighted to call you my colleagues. We know that occupational therapy is much needed in Vietnam. And with the current focus on rehabilitation from the World Health Organization, but also with that momentous occasion on the 24th of May of your government making this very strong commitment to rehabilitation, we know now that we have a great opportunity to push the agenda forward, demonstrating and advocating for creative and innovative practice that has always been at the forefront of occupational therapy in Vietnam. Thank you to everyone for your support so far. We know that the journey continues, and together we will continue to make that journey. Coming together, sharing experiences, learning from each other, and networking is important for all of us, for our personal and professional development. Today is a time for celebration, to mark everything that has been achieved so far. It's also a time for us to look forward and think about how we continue this journey together. So let's make today an enjoyable day, a successful day, a day full of new connections and also fun and friendship. Thank you again for welcoming me, and I wish us all a successful conference.
Vâng, xin trân trọng cảm ơn bà Samantha Shann, Chủ tịch Liên đoàn Hoạt động trị liệu thế giới.
Thank you, Ms. Samantha Shann, President of WFOT. Ladies and gentlemen, each and every steps in the development of OT in Vietnam has seen the support has been made possible from the support of USAID, and with two other very familiar international organizations MCVN and NV and HI. And next, we're going to hear from Mr. Didier Demey, representing HI, and he will be delivering his remark online.
Good morning. I'm going to assume that you can hear me. It looks like. So first of all, I'd like to thank you, you all very much for giving me the opportunity to address you all today. Okay, I'm online, I can see myself. Mazidul, the HI country manager, was supposed to address you, but he's out of the office, so he apologized for not being here today. I am very glad to speak on his behalf. After 8 years of implementing, the Admire project in its current form is coming to an end in a couple of months. Over the years, it has achieved great successes and had meaningful impact on the lives of many people with many persons with disabilities in Vietnam. I will not take the time to go through all the project successes. I just would like to focus on one of them. And that is the work that has been done by HI, by MCNV, and all the project partners with regard to building rehabilitation workforce in Vietnam. Being able to rely on a well-trained, competent, and professional workforce is of paramount importance when aiming at developing and strengthening rehabilitation services. We cannot expect quality, comprehensive, and sustainable services without relying on competent professionals. In that sense, addressing the crucial issue of workforce limitation has been underlined in the historical resolution on strengthening rehabilitation in health system that was recently endorsed by the World Health Assembly. In order to address these needs for developing competencies of rehabilitation professionals, the project has developed numerous continuing education activities and short-term training, mentoring, or online training resources. Moreover, we have invested time and resources for long-term needs by developing and upgrading entry-level education program for rehabilitation professionals. Thanks to the support of the World Physiotherapy, the Vietnamese PT Association, and medical universities, bachelor-level education program for physiotherapists have been strengthened in order to align with international standards and local context. Even more impressively, under the project umbrella, MCNV and the universities have managed to develop from almost nothing an OT education program that has put the OT profession on the map. When I arrived in Vietnam, that was back in 2016, occupational therapy was highly unknown. Today, this OT conference is a proof of how much and how rapidly things have changed. I therefore would like to congratulate all of you, and in particular MCNV, Hai Dung, and Ho Chi Minh City Medical Universities for the great job that was done. Working with all of you has been a great opportunity for HI and for myself. Finally, I would like to thank USAID for their support and their trust. For an international development agency, investing in professional education program is not always easy, as such intervention requires both funding and time. However, USAID has trusted us over the years to develop and strengthen education program for rehabilitation professionals. With entry-level programs now available for PTs, OTs, but as well for speech therapists, the future of rehabilitation services in Vietnam looks brighter than ever. So once again, congratulations to all of you for the job done, and have a successful conference today. Thank you very much.
Xin trân trọng cảm ơn ông Didier Demey, đại diện cho tổ chức HI.
Thank you very much for your speech, Dr. Didier Demey, on behalf of HI. Ladies and gentlemen, the Medical Committee Netherlands Vietnam is an organization that has made many important contributions to promoting the development of occupational therapy in Vietnam over the years. MCNV has also closely coordinated with Ho Chi Minh UNP, Hai Dung Medical Tech University to prepare for this conference. So to continue, we cordially invite you, Dr. Phạm Dũng, Country Director of MCNV, to make a few remarks.
Kính thưa Thạc sĩ Vũ Ngọc Bằng, đại diện cho Cục Khoa học Công nghệ Đào tạo Bộ Y tế, Thạc sĩ Nguyễn Phương Hiền, đại diện
Dear Dr. Phạm Văn Bằng, dear Ms. Nguyễn Phương Hiền, dear Ms. Lê Hà Vân, on behalf of the representative of international organization, and dear Dr. Ngô Quốc Đạt, Vice Rector of Ho Chi Minh UMP, dear Associate Professor Dr. Trần Trọng Hải from Vietnam Physiotherapy Association, dear Dr. Samantha Shann from WFOT, MCNV, we feel so honored. And this is a great pleasure for us to host this program. And we have been valued by all of the partners to put more efforts in developing rehabilitation field in Vietnam over the years. And regarding the achievement, I think in the speech of Dr. Didier Dimay, he has already mentioned them. We really appreciate and value the work and contribution to Vietnam health system. And first of all, I feel so happy to make changes in rehabilitation fields in Vietnam. And first of all is the changes in the awareness of people about different professional fields in rehabilitation. And regarding the governmental efforts, over the past few years, we have seen a lot of amendment and changes in policies in terms of rehabilitation service and the changes in the practicing facilities as well. And we also consider the important role of training facilities in changing the awareness and then changes in policies. All of them are very important in rehabilitation development in Vietnam. And in the event today, I feel so happy to see the colleagues, the pioneer in occupational therapy in Vietnam, and my colleagues in rehabilitation field. They all spend time to join us today, and they will bring us the most up-to-date knowledge and research in this field. And we have the collaboration and support from other international partners and scholars around the world. And one thing I feel so proud is that these pioneer occupational therapists in Vietnam, they are very talented and dynamic. And today in this conference, we will see very first debut of the pioneer occupational therapist in the first OT network in Vietnam. So we have seen the establishment and the formations of the relationships and collaboration in this very new field in Vietnam. And we can see that that is also a very crucial part for the development of occupational therapy. And I have to say that they have put all of their efforts and hearts into this work. And like in the speech of Dr. Samantha Shann, in terms of occupational therapy, at this point, we have many things to do. And we consider these as foundational step for us. And with the support from different agencies, international organizations, and partners, and healthcare facilities and training facility in Vietnam, we share the same passions and the same mission. And on behalf of MCNV, we would like to commit and promise to continue to collaborate the training partners and other practice facilities in Vietnam to enhance our training system. And hopefully we can continue to receive the support from international partners and donors. And thank you very much. I wish you all healthy and wish us a successful event.
Thank you, the Phạm Dũng, Country Director of MCNV. Ladies and gentlemen, in order to establish and develop a nationwide network for a profession is always one of the key goals for any profession, and for OT is coming together and is happening with the workforce that we have right now, the stakeholders, together with the support from our government and the international community. And next, we'd like to have Dr. Nguyễn Khắc Tuấn from the Hải Dương Medical Technical University to come on stage and to share with us a little bit about the network for occupational therapists in Vietnam. Good morning, distinguished guests, professors, colleagues, students. Hello to all of you here in the auditorium and those of you online. It's my honor to be here today and to have the opportunity to share with you a little bit about the OT network in Vietnam.
Nội dung trình bày của tôi hôm nay
So
gồm
these
có
are my key content. We'll talk about a little bit about the background, context, our aims, our network activities, some information about the Vietnam OT network, and our key message to all of you. So a little bit of a background for OT in Vietnam. At this point, OT in Vietnam has gone through the initial development, and we have achieved the initial pretty remarkable results. We have 2 institutions offering OT training in Vietnam, UMP and my university, the University of Medical Technical Technology in Hải Dương. And we have OTs practicing OT not just in the cities or provincial level of institutions, but also at the local level as well. And we've been very fortunate to have the support, the advocacy from the leadership in the Ministry of Health, leadership at the hospitals and the universities. And we've been feeling very proud when we managed to recruit and attract many students who want to major in OT. As they sign up for physiotherapy or rehabilitation, they are choosing OT. And we've been raising awareness, and people are aware of what OT can do, can offer now to patients and to everyone. And we now have the awareness. And as for policy, it's getting more and more extensive for us. We are grateful to the Ministry of Health for developing policies that facilitate the growth of OT, especially bringing in OT into insurance policies, that OT services can now be covered by insurance. We have many practitioners in rehabilitation and physiotherapies, but they're still not up to date with the best practices from OT. So it's very important to do further training. So what are our aims? Our objective pretty much to support capacity building for occupational therapists and OTAs, and also to enhance public awareness about OT. We participate in social dialogues, contribute inputs to stakeholders and policymakers to help facilitate the improvement and development of OTs in Vietnam. And we're also preparing for the right conditions to establish Vietnam OT Association as an official member of WFOT. So the network objectives, first of all, is to grow our membership. We need to increase our network members. We want to have more and more members in this one. And for capacity building, we need to continue to share information and experience. So that's a big goal between our members. And our activities include we are offering, first of all, technical assistance and collaboration with the agencies and stakeholders to organize seminars on OT. We also are organizing specialized OT seminars for our network members. We also participate in the organization of media events and raising awareness in society about rehabilitation, specifically in OT. We also want to actively participate in conferences, research activities, policy building guidelines related to OT, connect and build our international relations with other international organizations and professional associations, and to promote and prepare for the establishment process of Vietnam OT Association. And right now, our network is voluntary and self-governed, so we're not yet a formal organization that is recognized in Vietnam. So we're very pretty much self-made and self-responsible for now. Our network will have one plenary meeting one time a year, and also other online activities for our members. A little bit about our information. The OT network in Vietnam was established in May 31st, 2023. After a technical meeting, we decided to establish this network. And we received the initial support from MCNV through the Coordination Training Development Project sponsored by USAID. And we're very happy to announce to you today that we actually have our own website already. You can find us at otvietnam.net. And please log in to know more about OT. And as we continue to work to improve the quality of the website and helpfulness of the website. Our office will be set up in the future. Right now, we have a board of directors, including 10 people. I'd like to just introduce each of them. So I am, my name is Nguyễn Khắc Tuấn. I have a master's degree in OT from the Hải Dương Medical Technical University. And we also have Mr. Phạm Ngọc Đạt, also another master's degree holder in OT from UMP. And we have Mr. Nguyễn Phú Sĩ, who is the head of OT and Rehabilitation at Bach Mai Hospital. And we have Ms. Mai Trâm, also a master's degree holder in OT at our secretary. And then we have the member of our board of directors. We have Ms. Tuyết Ngân, lecturer from my university, Technical Medical University of Hải Dương, Ms. Vũ Thị Loan, also from the same university, Ms. Nguyễn Thị Cúc. We have also OT, Bachelor of OT, Đặng Ngọc Phương Thi, and Bachelor of OT, Đặng Xuân Tùng from the Pediatric Department of Huế Hospital, and OT Hồ Lê Trung, who's now working at the Hospital of Orthopedics and Rehabilitation of Ho Chi Minh City. We now have 176 members registered to join our network. It's still a pretty humble, small number, and we hope that this number will keep increasing in the future. So who can join our network? We welcome OT practitioners in Vietnam who have a clear criminal record, who volunteer to participate and are committed to comply with the bylaws of our network. So what are the benefits of joining the OT network in Vietnam? First of all, you're going to have access to information, participate in professional discussions or forums that we post on our network's website. There will be free participation in professional seminars. You're going to get direct professional advice where needed, and the network will always listen to member suggestions and to be open to sharing information and best practices with our members and stakeholders. We're very lucky. We're still receiving lots of support from the leading experts of OT in Vietnam and the world. So the network would like to facilitate opportunities of learning and professional development for our members. And our key message to you through this presentation and through the OT network, here's a little message from my heart. We invite you to join our network so that together we can contribute to the development of professional occupational therapy in Vietnam. And that is pretty much my number one desire in giving you this presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nguyễn Khắc Tuấn, faculty of Hải Dương Medical Technical University. And right after this, we warmly welcome and invite the representative, the initial members of Occupational Therapy Network in Vietnam. I'd like to invite to come on stage Mr. Nguyễn Khắc Tuấn, faculty of Hải Dương Medical Technical University, Mr. Phạm Ngọc Đạt, faculty of Ho Chi Minh UMP, Vice President, Mr. Nguyễn Phú Sĩ from Bach Mai Hospital, Vice President of the network, Ms. Nguyễn Huỳnh Ngọc Mai Trâm, faculty of Ho Chi Minh UMP, the network secretary, and the members of the network. And I'd like to invite to come on stage Ms. Nguyễn Thị Tuyết Ngân, Ms. Vũ Thị Loan, Ms. Đào Hoàng Phương Thi, Mr. Đặng Xuân Tùng, Mr. Hồ Lê Trung, and we cordially invite Ms. Samantha Shann, the president of WFOT, to present flowers to the network representative.
Vâng, xin trân trọng cảm ơn bà Samantha Shann.
Thank you very much, Ms. Samantha Shann and the initial key members of Vietnam Occupational Therapy Network. And we wish the network with great success and more contribution in the near future. Once again, thank you. Once again, thanks, Ms. Samantha Shann, President of WFOT and the Executive Board of Vietnam OT Network. Ladies and gentlemen, the next part of the scientific conference today, we will see the presentation sessions. And to run the first presentation session this morning, we would like to introduce the members who chair this session. We have Associate Professor Dr. Ngô Quốc Đạt, Vice Rector of Ho Chi Minh UMP, Dr. Phạm Thị Cẩm Hưng, representative from Hải Dương Medical Technical University, Dr. Phạm Dũng from MCNV, and Madam Samantha Shann, representative from WFOT. And now we'd like to invite the chairman of the first session to run the session. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the chair people of the first session, I'd like to introduce you the first presentation with a theme as building a globally connected profession of occupational therapy around the world. And this first presentation will be delivered to you by Dr. Samantha Shann, represent from WFOT. So I'd like to introduce you briefly a few information about Dr. Samantha Shann. Dr. Samantha Shann is the president of the World Federation of Occupational Therapists. She graduated as an OT in 1992 and has worked in a wide range of clinical, management, and educational settings, both in the UK and other countries around the world. For the last 20 years, Dr. Shann has supported the development of occupational therapy internationally. She has worked in a variety of settings of low, middle, and high resource settings. And thanks to those efforts, she has worked in a political manner to create changes at different levels. And she committed to sharing technical experts and advocate for the policy change in the field. So once again, we would like to invite Dr. Samantha Shann to come on stage.
Good morning again. So again, thank you for inviting me to be part of this very momentous conference. So today, we are going to hear a lot about occupational therapy. When we have such a mixed audience, it is such a delight, but also sometimes a little bit complicated. So for the next 30 minutes, I'm going to introduce you a little bit to the World Federation of Occupational Therapists and the international family. So hopefully those of you that know very little about WFOT will learn a bit more about what we do. And those of you that are familiar will get to see some of the resources that might be able to help you in your day-to-day practice as occupational therapists or students. So the World Federation of Occupational Therapists is the global voice for occupational therapy. I'm sure today we will hear many definitions of occupational therapy. From the World Federation of Occupational Therapists' point of view, Occupational therapy is a client-centered health profession concerned with promoting health and well-being through occupation, with the primary goal of occupational therapy to enable people to participate in the activities of everyday life. Occupational therapists achieve this outcome by working with people and communities to enhance their ability to engage in the occupations or activities they want to, need to, and are expected to do, either by modifying that occupation or the environment to better support occupational engagement. So WFOT, as the worldwide body, represents the occupational therapy profession in its role of improving world health and well-being internationally. Last year, the World Federation of Occupational Therapists celebrated its 70th anniversary. And for those 70 years, WFOT has advocated for human rights. Occupational therapists are concerned with human rights in pursuing occupational justice for all. WFOT condemns all actions or circumstances that infringe on the rights of people and communities to live purposeful and engaged lives. And therefore, occupational therapists around the world are obliged to promote the actualization of human rights through occupational rights. And that's about daily participation in everyday life. The World Federation of Occupational Therapists has 107 member organizations. So whilst occupational therapy in Vietnam may be very young, you are actually part of a very large global family. And I look forward to the day, and I think very soon, when we see Vietnam on this slide, and then we can all have a big cheer. But maybe we have a round of applause now, because we have come so far in the journey. To be a full member of the World Federation of Occupational Therapists, a country requires an association of occupational therapists, and also at least one education program for occupational therapy that meets the WFOT international guidelines. Full members that meet those requirements are part of our council and vote at council. We also have associate member organisations. Associate member organisations in WFOT are non-voting, however, they do contribute to our council decisions. And these are countries where the association is formed, but they are still developing education programmes. And then we also work through our regional groups. So as well as our fully recognised membership, we are also presently working with 30 countries, Vietnam being one of them, to enable them to become members of WFOT. Every 2 years, the World Federation of Occupational Therapists collects data about the profession internationally. And yesterday at a meeting, I talked to delegates from Vietnam about including Vietnam in the next round of data that we are presently collecting. So next time I show a slide like this, I know we will have Vietnam on there. We know that we are a diverse profession around the world. Some of our member organisations, such as the United States of America, has had occupational therapy for over 100 years. And therefore we can see that they have many occupational therapists. But actually, over 50% of WFOT member organisations have less than 50 occupational therapists in their country. And that shows that huge diversity that we have in the profession. It also speaks to the importance of developing things correctly. Sometimes we can move very fast and get lots of numbers, but actually the stability and the foundations are much stronger if we work with quality and we work together and we move slowly. Now, this slide is very good to show us how many occupational therapists there are around the world. But actually, this one is the really important one. This slide is the data that we share with the World Health Organization and with governments when we look at workforce planning, because this shows the number of occupational therapists per 10,000 head of population. And the graph changes very much. Yeah? So even the United States, that has had occupational therapy for a long, long time, only has 4 occupational therapists per 10,000 head of population. It's the Scandinavian countries where we actually see that they have, 14, 12 occupational therapists to that 10,000. And it's this number that we're working with the World Health Organization, with the other international professional organizations such as World Physiotherapy, the International Society of Orthotics and Prosthetics, to look at how we look at workforce planning to increase the number of occupational therapists per 10,000 head of population, because that's how we start to make a difference. We also collect data on the number of WFOT approved education programs around the world. And we know that we are working at that approval for the programs here in Vietnam. So from all this data, we know that we presently have 633,000 occupational therapists practicing worldwide. We have 1,100 approved WFOT education programs, 58,000 occupational therapy assistants worldwide, and over 120,000 occupational therapy students studying on WFOT approved programs. Since WFOT started collecting this data in 2006, we have seen a huge increase in the number of occupational therapists. So 137% increase in the number of occupational therapists worldwide, an 83% increase in the number of approved education programs, 58% increase in the number of WFOT approved students on those approved programs, and 22% increase in occupational therapists worldwide. Why is this data so important? It enables us to see that we are part of a large professional, international profession, but it also enables us to have discussions with government. It enables us to look at how we move forward with workforce development. Where is occupational therapy strong? Where does it require some development? And we can look at that from country to country as we collect the data every 2 years. We help collect that data for the country. However, we also start to get an international picture of what's happening. And by getting that international picture, we know that there is a shortage of occupational therapists worldwide. But we also know where there's a shortage of occupational therapists in particular areas of practice. So if we put all of our data together, we see international gaps in mental health practice, in stroke rehabilitation, and also dementia. We also see national, regional, and international factors that impact on the shortage of occupational therapists. So we know that there is often some difficulties around awareness or more formal recognition of occupational therapy in countries. We know that the wages or salaries for occupational therapists worldwide are not always very good. And we know that that supply of experienced occupational therapists needs some investment. So it's great that we invest in education of students, but we also need to ensure that there is that investment in continuing professional development, ensuring that our graduates and professions continue to develop to provide the expertise for the profession, but also for the people that we serve. It's that set of data that helps the World Federation of Occupational Therapists set its organisational aims. So it sets the priorities of what we work towards within our 5-year strategic plans. So WFOT's organisational aims are about increasing the awareness of occupational therapy, advancing the excellence in occupational therapy practice, developing quality education and research, ensuring that WFOT is efficient and effective, demonstrating leadership in occupational therapy, and through all of that, promoting health, well-being, and justice. So how do we do some of this work? WFOT publishes timely position statements and responses to things that are happening globally. It also publishes many position papers that you as occupational therapists, as managers of hospitals, are able to use and freely download from the website. And any that you want to translate into Vietnamese, you are very welcome to do. Just let us know that you're doing it so we can help share your resources too. We also develop an international professional journal, the WFOT Bulletin. We have a congress every 4 years. Last year we met in Paris, and actually since I put this presentation together, we have made the announcement that in 2026, the next WFOT Congress will be in Thailand. So that's not very far away, and I look forward to seeing many papers and presentations from occupational therapists and students in Vietnam at that Congress, because it's so important that you share your ideas of practice with the rest of the world. We develop some free online learning resources. These are aimed very much at occupational therapists and occupational therapist students. Some of them are around disaster management, around displaced persons. But the two in particular that I think that you will find very, very useful in Vietnam are the QUEST, the Quality Evaluation Strategy Tool, which helps you to evaluate the quality of the services that you are providing and developing here in Vietnam. It helps you to collect the data to show your hospital managers, to show the government the real value of occupational therapy. There are many resources attached to that on the website, and I really urge all occupational therapists and students in Vietnam to access those materials. Attached to that is the economic evaluations tool that helps you to show the economic value that occupational therapy brings to health and well-being. We also have Ocean, the Occupational Therapy International Online Network. And this is where you can really engage with your international colleagues around the world. So there are professional discussion forums there for you. So you can join the discussion. It's open to students as well as qualified occupational therapists. You can ask questions of your international colleagues, but you can also answer questions because you have lots of expertise and lots of knowledge here in Vietnam as well. So do not be afraid to join the discussion both ways. So I've mentioned these a few times in my welcoming speech and also today. WFOT for the last 70 years has had the minimum standards for the education of occupational therapists. And this is an internationally recognized benchmark for occupational therapy education. And I know that the program here at the university is working towards this approval. And this is part of that step towards WFOT membership, but it is also about showing that recognition at an international level of the quality of education that you are providing for occupational therapists here in Vietnam. Within those minimum standards, we very clearly talk about occupational therapists teaching occupational therapy subjects and about there being 1,000 clinical or fieldwork hours, ensuring that our graduates are fit to serve the populations that they need to serve here in Vietnam. Other examples of how WFOT works on behalf of the profession is with our international key stakeholders. And I'm really delighted that World Physiotherapy have been able to join us today. We work at that international level with other international organisations, but also through the World Rehabilitation Alliance at the World Health Organization, with Humanity and Inclusion, with the International Society of Wheelchair Professionals, Cochrane Collaboration, the International Society of Prosthetics and Orthotics, and many others, but these are ones where we have very close communication and collaboration plans. We have been in official relationships with the World Health Organization, WHO, for over 70 years now. And we have a collaboration plan, and that collaboration plan is approved every 2 years by the executive of the World Health Organization. Our present collaboration plan focuses on assistive technology, looking at the global cooperation of assistive technology through the GATE initiative. We've been part of the recently launched wheelchair standards. It's looking at human resources, using all of that data that we've just looked at to help look at how we look at workforce planning nationally, regionally, and internationally. Occupational therapists are part of the classification, the International Classification of Functioning, the ICF, and its development. We collaborate on projects on aging and life course, on mental health, and also within disability and rehabilitation. And it's disability and rehabilitation I want us just to focus on a little bit now. In 2017, the World Health Organization launched Rehabilitation 2030. And that was a call to action for governments and the world to recognize what rehabilitation brings to the health and well-being of populations. And we've heard a number of times this morning how in Vietnam that has been taken forward very courageously by your government with that commitment on the 24th of May this year. And that real commitment to strengthening the workforce, to strengthening services. We all know that there is a great urgent need for rehabilitation. And last week, the World Health Organization launched some products around rehabilitation, but also launched the World Rehabilitation Alliance, which is there to advocate for rehabilitation internationally. And the World Federation of Occupational Therapists is a member of the World Rehabilitation Alliance. Myself is part of the steering committee of that World Rehabilitation Alliance. And that is how we represent you as a profession of occupational therapists in Vietnam within that global rehabilitation agenda. We know that your government here in Vietnam is committed to this, and that is so, so important. We know that around the world, many countries, there is an urgent need to strengthen rehabilitation. Globally, an estimated 2.4 billion people are living with a health condition that could benefit from rehabilitation. And this number is expected to grow due to people living longer and with more chronic disease and disability. And it's estimated that in low and middle income countries around the world, more than 50% of people do not receive the rehabilitation they require. And that is what is so encouraging about the commitment that your government made this year and how we are going to move this agenda forward here in Vietnam together. Because we all know that occupational therapy is an essential part of rehabilitation. WFOT, in its advocacy and development of occupational therapy, also advocates occupational therapy as an autonomous profession. Occupational therapists are equal members of the interdisciplinary health, social, and rehabilitation teams. Occupational therapists conduct individualized assessments and develop occupation, performance, participation-based goals with individuals, groups, and/or communities. It is important that occupational therapy services and interventions are determined only by occupational therapists. And why can we be so strong that occupational therapists need to guide our own profession? It's because we have quality, robust, international education standards. So those minimum standards for the education of occupational therapists that we've talked about so much. So WFOT advocates that occupational therapy education programs should be situated in institutes of higher education, deliver contextual and culturally relevant curriculums. So curriculums that have been written and developed for Vietnam. That we integrate fieldwork and placements throughout the education of our students. Their occupational therapists teach occupational therapy students and provide leadership on the programme. And that we are awarding at least a bachelor's degree or equivalent credential. And that allows us to have a professional international understanding, a professional international use of language, theory, practice, and education and research. And it makes us very strong as a profession. And I thank everybody that is supporting that development here in Vietnam. As a profession, we are often seen as very small, but actually we're also very, very strong. because occupational therapists are very good at working together. However, as a profession, we need to be strategic. We need to learn together and we need to listen to each other. As a profession, we need to challenge each other and also the profession. But in doing that, we need to be respectful of each other, respecting that we all come from diverse backgrounds and we all come with different sets of knowledge. But by coming together, we grow stronger. And that message was particularly for the occupational therapists in the room, but also for you as all key stakeholders of occupational therapy in Vietnam. Because the more that we come together, the stronger that we will make occupational therapy, and thereby promote a more open and just society that enables justice and participation for everyone. We've heard this morning about the network of occupational therapists here in Vietnam. And it's so exciting to stand here as the president of the World Federation of Occupational Therapists and hear about that real development and that real registration of the network coming together. Because that network will be the forerunner for your professional association here in Vietnam. However, even at this point, the World Federation of Occupational Therapists recognizes the network as the voice of occupational therapy here in Vietnam. And we urge you all to get behind it so that we can work together to move you into that position where you become recognized as an association here in Vietnam, but also internationally. The network and professional associations are so important that we have a strong, clear voice with one clear message for the profession in country. We need a network or an association to act on behalf of the profession here in Vietnam, to advocate with the support of the World Federation for positions for occupational therapists in the workplace, to help set professional codes of conduct and standards of practice, but to provide that leadership and ultimately become a member of the World Federation of Occupational Therapists. So thank you again to all of you that have brought the network to fruition. And I am really looking forward to the next steps in how we develop the network into the association. Thank you. So for all of us, because there are many stakeholders here today, but also for the occupational therapists and students here, we need to be, as we develop occupational therapy, critical thinkers. As occupational therapy students and practitioners, you need to learn and question what you are learning. You need to think about some of the occupational therapy practices that you hear about around the world and really think about what that means for you here in Vietnam. You need to have the confidence to develop occupational therapy as you see fit for Vietnam, to acknowledge the daily occupations that people participate in every day, to recognize the ways that your populations and your communities come together and ensure that you serve the people the best that you can. As a profession, you need to share your perspectives amongst yourselves here in Vietnam, but also internationally. And I urge you all to be those active members of the network of occupational therapists so that we can grow occupational therapy, so that you can grow as a profession, so that the patients and students and the people that you serve achieve the best outcomes, and that we get occupational therapy that is fit for practice, education, and research here in Vietnam. WFOT has some resources that can help you in the advocacy and leadership that you will need as you continue with this journey. And knowing that WFOT is with you in every step of their advocacy process. It is working together as occupational therapists, but also interdisciplinary as the rehabilitation health workforce, both at a national, local, regional, and international level, that working together will help make us stronger. Advocacy and the promotion and development of occupational therapy here in Vietnam is everyone's responsibility. Today's like today are exciting and we have lots of enthusiasm, lots of motivation. The challenge is to keep that going when we step outside of the room. So let's remember to network today so that we keep that motivation. The other big way to come together as an international family of occupational therapists is through World Occupational Therapy Day, which is always celebrated on the 27th of October. And this year's theme, very fittingly, is unity through community. So you have a number of months, but I look forward to seeing how you celebrate and advocate for occupational therapy this World Occupational Therapy Day in 2023. So let's stay connected. Let's continue this journey together. Together, the journey of challenges actually becomes a lot more fun. And please do come and talk to me today. I want to get to know you, and please feel free to ask any questions of myself or WFOT. Thank you.
Vâng. Xin trân trọng cảm ơn bài báo
Yes,
cáo.
thank you so much to a very thorough and impressive presentation from Dr. Samantha. I find it very inspirational to all of the OTs, our stakeholders here, and anyone who's interested in OT. And next, I would like to introduce Professor Lynette Mackenzie, who graduated in OT program in the UK in 1981, and then she moved to Australia and started to work at the University of Newcastle. She worked in orthopedics, general medicine, and managed the hunter equipment service. She had a PhD, completed her PhD in epidemiology in 2002 by investigating falls among older people in New South Wales. Professor Lynette Mackenzie is now the Dean of Occupational Therapy in the Department of Occupational Therapy in Sydney University, and also the editor-in-chief of the International OT Journal. So next, please welcome Professor Lynette Mackenzie on her presentation titled, Why Occupational Therapy is One of the Greatest Ideas of the 21st Century. After the presentation from Professor Lynette, we will have a photo op of everyone in the conference hall today. Yes, over to you, Professor Lynette.
I'm sorry, but I'm a bit of a case study for rehabilitation today. So I'm sorry I'm sitting instead of standing. I've hurt my knee, so we'll see how we go. So I've spent the last 2 weeks in a very privileged position teaching occupational therapy students and working with them with some research home visits. And I have a lot of confidence in the future of occupational therapy based on that experience. So I've only got good things ahead of you, I think. So I decided on this topic because I believe occupational therapy has a huge amount to offer the puzzle of health service provision that we all face, regardless of which country we're in. So there are big issues that need to be faced for the 21st century. although we're a quarter of the way through it already, but it's something that we need to spend some time thinking about so that this new profession in Vietnam can plan for the future as well. So you're going to hear a lot about specific examples of how occupational therapists work clinically in the afternoon, but I thought I'd finish off this more general session and talk about the important role that I think occupational therapy has in helping communities and individuals this century. So what I did to start my planning for my talk was I spoke to some of my colleagues in Australia and asked them what they thought about why occupational therapy is important for the 21st century. And the two main words that came up in our conversations were holistic and practical. So for them, occupational therapy was holistic because it addresses the needs of the whole person. So whilst it is a profession that's concerned with physical impairments, it's also concerned with assisting individuals and communities to be able to engage in their important activities. So it goes beyond any physical impairments that people might present with. And it enhances their participation so that they're able to fulfill their roles in society and maintain these. And this may also involve adapting the community to help the environment to enable them to continue doing this. So the OT students and I did 38 visits last week, 38 home visits. So there were lots of examples of ways that the environment could improve occupational participation for the people that we visited. The other word was practical. And by practical, I mean that occupational therapists are trained to devise individual solutions that work for individuals and communities so that they can overcome some of the health needs that they have that affect their functioning. So occupational therapy uses tailored solutions. In other words, they look at individuals and their individual goals. So this involves helping people to do the things that they want to do. You've heard this before from Samantha, but it helps people to do the things they want to do and the things that they have to do, and sometimes the things that they aspire to do in the future. So we work in a variety of settings to do that. And a lot of these are outside of hospitals. So it would include the home, and it would include schools, it would include workplaces, as well as hospitals, or anywhere else that's relevant to that goal for someone. You also heard the definition of occupational therapy from Samantha, so I won't go into it too much, other than to say that it's a very comprehensive view of what the role of occupational therapy is. So it's about functioning, and it's about people being able to do what they want to do. That's what we mean by occupation. So it's about promoting health and well-being by enabling people to be able to do the occupations they need to do. And this can help improve physical and mental health, as well as their overall well-being. And so often we need to adapt the environment because that can be the thing that prevents people from engaging in some of their activities. So what are the health needs of the 21st century? We can think of a range of things, I'm sure, that we experience from living in the 21st century that challenge our health. I think the recent COVID experience has identified for all of us just how much of a global world we live in. It affected absolutely everybody. And it's also identified gaps in the way that our health services were able to respond to a major worldwide health challenge. We can all learn from each other on the basis of that. But we're already, as I said earlier, a quarter of the way through the 21st century. So we're already living it. In the 1980s, I found an article written by one of the previous WFOT presidents, Sharon Britnell, about what we're going to need in the 21st century. So I thought it was rather interesting to see what they said and to see what's actually happening. And they cited several key factors that they felt were going to be important. And I think they're relevant for all of us, including people in Vietnam. Population growth, I think we're all experiencing that. Older populations, so there's a lot more people aging, as well as a lot more infants surviving premature births and so on, who may need help during their lives. And an analysis of the causes of death in different countries also identifies mental health and palliative care services as very important across the world. So monitoring function, preventing disability, and ensuring quality of life were identified as the key issues for occupational therapy in the 21st century. So I think we've seen examples of that from all the people that have spoken so far. So we can think of the health needs of the 21st century in terms of a global level. So I've already talked about a pandemic, which I hope we don't ever repeat again. But there's also natural disasters, migration of people, displacement of people around different countries as well, that cause a huge range of health needs globally. On a local level, we can see what the influences on health are in our own countries, and these in turn will affect the health of individuals. So it's a big issue that we're talking about. So from my looking through the literature to prepare this talk, these are my list, all right? I haven't referenced it because it's my list. But these are the health needs that I've identified from reading. So there's obviously an increased burden of non-communicable diseases or chronic health problems in the community now. People used to die from a lot of infectious diseases at the turn of the 19th century. And this is sort of all been solved to a large extent by vaccination and so on in the world. But we are left with a lot more chronic disability, case in point. So there's also mental health. That's a big issue. Certainly in Australia, it's becoming more of an issue amongst young people with anxiety and depression, growing all the time. As I said earlier, the aging populations across the world are going to make a lot of demand on services. And this is where occupational therapy can really help. The population, as I said, is aging, so that as people are living longer, they also have longer periods of disability to contend with, which need to be addressed. There's also a lot of increasing technology use to support health, but sometimes this isn't equitable. There are the people that have technology and the people that don't. So that is a health need in itself. Many health systems can be quite fragmented, and this is a problem in Australia as well as in a lot of other countries, where your entry into the health system may not help you access all the services you need across the health system. Sometimes they don't talk to each other very well, and that's an issue in Australia as well. So workforce is a big issue as well. And of course, you need a sufficient number of health professionals who are qualified to actually make a difference. So the occupational therapy workforce in Vietnam is in its infancy, but has tremendous potential to address many of the health challenges in Vietnam. In Australia, for instance, we have 25,000, you saw the graph, 25,000 registered occupational therapists and a much smaller population. But there is still a shortage. So there will definitely be a shortage in Vietnam for those sorts of services. And public health interventions are needed to prevent chronic problems becoming more serious and to even prevent them starting at all if possible. As the numbers of people with some form of disability continue to increase, there's a huge need for better social inclusion of those people as well, so that they're able to participate in their occupations in the local community and maybe can continue to contribute productively, such as returning to work and being able to continue with those roles after a disability. So these are the definitions of the social determinants of health as defined by Healthy People 2030. So these will become very important as our health services evolve in the 21st century. And occupational therapists can actually contribute to all of these components to assist different groups of people. For instance, working in schools to assist children with challenges in education and development, developing health services that are needed in different areas. So healthcare access will be a big issue for everyone in Vietnam to be able to offer occupational therapy widely throughout the population, including rural settings, where access may be difficult. Working in the environment and the built environment and neighbourhoods is going to be very important for all those older people that are aging at home. And that's basically what my area of practice is involved in. I'm interested in falls prevention, so trying to prevent older people being injured because of their environments, as well as developing social and community resources and assisting people with challenges to contribute to the economy for the benefit of society as a whole. So in other words, a disability shouldn't mean that people are excluded from those roles. So my proposal is that we should view occupational therapy's contribution is a bit like a key that can unlock the health potential of individuals and communities. By working on an individual, a community level, occupational therapists can really make a difference. So if we think about the keyhole first, we have the keystone, which is around the keyhole. So that's all the contexts of where occupational therapists might work. And we've already mentioned a lot of those in all the speeches that people have made so far. But for occupational therapy to be responsive, we need to take into account the cultural, the socio-economic, the political, institutional, social, technological, and physical contexts that go towards health or ill health. And then the keyhole is the bit in the middle, which is the individual or the community that an occupational therapist will work with, and their own particular characteristics that will affect their occupations, such as the meaning that they attribute to what they do, their values, roles, social situations, skills, what they can contribute to their own health, their motivation, their physical status, their age and gender. All of these will have an impact on the outcome of occupational therapy interventions and how occupational therapists will need to adapt their approach to make it more tailored to different people. So in that case, occupational therapy is the key that can fit that space for an individual. So it involves providing a just right fit into the keyhole. So in order to do that, we need to understand what people's occupational needs are. We need to analyze what their skills and values need to be to improve functioning. We need a range of interventions to address their needs, such as rehabilitation programs, environmental changes, adapting occupations, and preventing ongoing disability. So we can devise interventions to address any deficits that are there. So occupational therapy is a very specific key. So if you try and stick a different key into a keyhole that doesn't fit, it won't turn. So occupational therapy is a very specific key that can unlock some of those issues. So I just want to talk about how occupational therapists view ill health and health, because we look at things much more broadly than physical impairment. So for us, being healthy is having an experience of occupational justice. So we are able to do what we want to do, have to do, and would like to do. So when people experience injustice, that's when occupational therapists need to be mobilized. So occupational deprivation is an example of what ill health, where people are unable to participate in their occupations because of an external force that prevents them from doing so. So that may be a disability. So it will affect their usual occupations, like the loss of a job, onset of a disability, all those sorts of issues could be in that category. Then there's occupational imbalance, where our lives can be very imbalanced. So we can either be over-occupied and have too much to do so that we are unhealthy, or we can be under-occupied and have not enough to do, which makes us unhealthy, which can lead to boredom, anxiety, depression, all of those mental health issues that we see in the community. And the last one is occupational alienation. And that's defined as people feeling disconnected and not having feeling a loss of identity. And again, I'll use older people as an example because that's what I know about. But older people perhaps may not understand technology and may also feel disconnected and less in control of their lives because of events that are happening to them. So they might experience occupational alienation. So that's why we talk about health slightly differently. So just to go to the evidence quickly, whoops, I think I've missed one. No, I haven't. Sorry, I have to look over there. So thinking about health differently means that occupational therapists have different roles. So they have roles defined here by the Canadian Occupational Therapy Association that go beyond just treating an impairment. Our roles are about adapting occupations, advocating for different occupations that people can no longer engage in, coaching people, collaborating and consulting to give access to occupations, designing and building things that enable occupations to happen, and educating people, engaging with people, and specializing in occupational engagement. So those roles based on occupational ill health are all very different. So I'll go to the evidence now. And we know that occupational therapy is effective in managing many of these aspects of ill health. For instance, the top article talks about the effectiveness of occupational therapy in improving the ADL participation of people with depression. Huge role to be had both in Vietnam and in Australia. And the second article talks about the effectiveness of occupational therapy to improve the social participation of people after a stroke. So again, stroke is a very high need in Vietnam as well. So there's plenty of evidence that occupational therapy can make a difference with this group. And then there is evidence that home hazard reduction in the homes of older people does prevent falls, especially when it's conducted by an occupational therapist. You may be interested to know that interventions that did not include an occupational therapist were not effective in this review. And there are also interventions to improve return to work after stroke. So there are plenty of examples of evidence where occupational therapists can make a difference. So in my role with the World Federation of Occupational Therapists, I've been involved in helping to develop research priorities for occupational therapy worldwide. And these underpin how occupational therapy can make a difference in the 21st century. So what we did was we asked all the member organisations, all 107 of them, and all the programs that provide WFOT accredited courses, I think there were about 350 at the time, and we asked them all what they thought the important research priorities should be for occupational therapy in the future. So these were the list that we came up with after doing a Delphi process to try and prioritise these. There's obviously a need worldwide, but especially in Vietnam, for more research to demonstrate the effectiveness of occupational therapy interventions, as well as how occupational therapists apply evidence that already exists, evidence-based practice, participation in everyday life. That was an important indication for any therapeutic group. Healthy aging was important, as well as occupational therapy for chronic conditions. Being able to intervene with communities and provide evidence of how that was successful was regarded as important. The role technology plays in occupational therapy was also important, as well as how the occupational therapy profession supports itself. So things like education and training that we're talking about today. I think I've nearly finished, so there we go. So my conclusion is, I hope I've been able to convince you that occupational therapy is an important contributor to health in the 21st century, and that we hold some keys to help individuals and communities to reach their full occupational potential. We can achieve this through practice and research. With its focus on function and participation, occupational therapy is already aligned with current trends in healthcare to be more client-centered, to go beyond just treating symptoms or conditions but to actually help people to re-engage in their lives. And of course, occupational therapy can't do this alone. And given multidisciplinary collaboration is a hallmark of occupational therapy, better client outcomes can be achieved. So occupational therapy is a profession that aligns with many of the key trends and priorities in current healthcare. Its focus on function, multidisciplinary collaboration, evidence-based practice, and increasing demand for service make it an important and valuable profession for the 21st century. Thank you very much.
Dạ vâng ạ, xin cảm ơn.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Lynette Mackenzie. Please remain on stage for a photo. And before the break time, I'd like to invite one of the delegates to come on stage for a group photo with our experts. May we have you on stage now? Thank you. We'd like to invite one of the chair people from the sessions and the delegates and our distinguished guests to come on stage for a group photo before the break time. Thank you.
Một lần nữa xin trân trọng kính mời quý vị đại biểu ban chủ tọa chúng ta cùng lên sân khấu để chụp ảnh cùng với ban tổ chức. Và kính thưa quý vị, và trước khi mà đến với phiên hội nghị sáng ngày hôm nay, tiếp tục phiên hội nghị sáng ngày hôm nay, thì xin mời quý vị đại biểu chúng ta nghỉ giải lao trong 15 phút. Ban tổ chức có chuẩn bị tiệc nhẹ ở phía ngoài đại sảnh và quý vị sẽ quay trở lại vào lúc 10:40 để tiếp tục cho phiên sáng nay. Vâng, xin trân trọng cảm ơn quý vị đại biểu và xin mời quý vị đại biểu chúng ta giải lao trong 15 phút và ban tổ chức có chuẩn bị tiệc nhẹ ở phía ngoài đại sảnh và chúng ta sẽ quay trở lại vào lúc 10:40. Kính thưa toàn thể quý vị, nếu như mà quý vị nào có cần nhu cầu là lấy giấy đi đường, đóng dấu đi đường thì chúng ta qua ra bàn tiếp tân và gặp cử nhân Đào Hoàng Phương Thi hoặc là thạc sĩ Phạm Ngọc Đàn thì chúng ta đóng dấu đi đường. Kính thưa toàn thể quý vị, chúng ta đã hết giờ nghỉ giải lao và xin mời toàn thể quý vị đại biểu chúng ta đang còn ở ngoài hội trường, chúng ta tiến vào để tiếp tục cho phiên hội nghị sáng ngày hôm nay. Vâng, xin nhắc lại chúng ta đã hết giờ nghỉ giải lao và xin mời quý vị đại biểu chúng ta quay trở lại hội trường để tiếp tục cho phiên sáng ngày hôm nay. Và xin mời các thành viên ban tổ chức chúng ta điều phối ở phía bên ngoài. Vâng, xin mời các đội tiếp tân và thành viên ban tổ chức chúng ta nhé. Các quý vị đại biểu đang còn ở bên ngoài, chúng ta tiến vào hội trường để tiếp tục cho phiên ngày sáng hôm nay. Vâng, xin nhắc lại, xin mời trân trọng kính mời toàn thể quý vị đại biểu chúng ta tiến vào hội trường để tiếp tục cho phiên hội nghị sáng ngày hôm nay.
There was no exit break.
Vâng, kính thưa toàn thể quý vị đại biểu, để tiếp tục cho phiên các báo cáo trong sáng ngày hôm nay, thì sau đây chúng tôi xin trân trọng kính mời ban chủ tọa sẽ tiếp tục điều hành phiên cho sáng ngày hôm nay. Xin trân trọng
Ladies and gentlemen, to continue the morning sessions, now I would like to invite the chair people come back to our auditorium to continue the morning session.
Good morning, everyone. Okay, good morning, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the quick break that we had. It is now my pleasure to introduce Professor Anne Cusack. Anne is Professor and Chair of Occupational Therapy at the University of Sydney, Adjunct Professor Charles Darwin University, and Emeritus Professor Western Sydney University. Anne has a 40-year career in health, biomedical and social science, holding academic, teaching, research appointments, and higher education academic governance leadership roles. Before her academic leadership roles, she was an occupational therapy academic at the University of Sydney Cumberland College, and an occupational therapist in acute psychiatry, neurorehabilitation, and physical rehabilitation. Thank you, Anne, for joining us today.
Xin chào, good morning. Please come in and sit down and be ready to listen. You see, I am a teacher. I wait for the class to be ready to learn. My talk today will be 30 minutes, and it is about occupational therapy in stroke rehabilitation. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished university, Ministry of Health, hospital, and sponsoring organizations, thank you for the invitation to share information about occupational therapy rehabilitation for stroke survivors. Occupational therapy brings a unique focus to neurorehabilitation. We see here that the Vietnamese Stroke Rehabilitation Guideline, published in 2018, says the primary goal of occupational therapy is to enable people to participate in the activities of everyday life, occupy time, and bring meaning and purpose to life. These things people need to do, want to do, and are expected to do. Occupational therapy has an important role for stroke rehabilitation. Let us first define what we mean by stroke in plain language. In Australia, this definition is given to patients and families by doctors in the community or in hospitals. People at risk of stroke or who have had a stroke need to know what this definition is, because they are the ones that must work to prevent it or to recover from it. People who have a stroke usually need rehabilitation. Stroke is a non-communicable disease. It is the leading cause of adult death and permanent disability in Vietnam. These statistics show the enormous scale of the problem. Prevention and rehabilitation are the only ways to reduce the social and economic burden on Vietnam after stroke and alleviate the personal and family suffering that comes from stroke. The Vietnam Ministry of Health recognises the importance of rehabilitation. The 214 objective identifies rehabilitation can improve the quality of life, support social participation, and give everyone in the community an opportunity to contribute to their communities. Since stroke is a major cause of adult disability, there have been many actions in the area of stroke to work towards the achievement of the Ministry of Health objective. On the next two slides, we see some highlights. On this slide, we see before 2014, there were good hospital-based stroke initiatives. However, after 2014, more Vietnam-wide strategies came into being. These included quality standards for stroke in 2015. Circular 47 was a very important milestone because this highlighted the need for specialist stroke treatment and rehabilitation centres and the investment by the ministry in these rehabilitation centres. The first national survey of people with disability in Vietnam helped to identify stroke-related disability in 2016. And the 2017 collaboration of the World Stroke Organization with the Vietnamese Medical Association helped build capacity in stroke care by training health workers and family caregivers. The global standard for stroke rehabilitation care must include occupational therapists. On this slide, we see more recent developments. In 2017, 2018, and 2019, more international collaborative programs were established to build on achievements of the earlier years in Vietnam. This included the ANGELS program, which was an initiative of the World Stroke Organization to improve the quality of stroke care in Vietnam, and the growth in data collection through stroke registries using the standard measures like the RESQ or the STPS. This helps build the database. Importantly, for OT, the development and publication of rehabilitation guidelines for stroke, general guidelines, and rehabilitation-specific guidelines for occupational therapy also happened. Why are these developments important? Each of these developments set the foundation for OT in Vietnam in stroke rehabilitation. They state that OT is needed and will be effective. They establish expectations of OT in stroke care, what value we can bring to treatment and to outcomes. OTs must meet these expectations to earn the respect of our colleagues. But remember, OT in Vietnamese stroke care is new. Doctors, nurses, and others will take time to learn how to use all of the OT skills. For example, in some hospitals in Vietnam, OTs are not permitted to do cognitive assessment. In other hospitals, the role of OT is restricted to upper limb care. This could be because OT is so new that rehabilitation doctors do not know how to use the full scope of OT practice, and therefore they do not use them fully. It could also be because professions have a history of filling in the service gaps because previously they had no OT. So now is a good time for rehabilitation doctors and multidisciplinary teams to use this guideline to learn the full scope of OT services that are recommended for Vietnam, so the breadth and quality of stroke care can be increased. Otherwise, stroke services will have highly trained OTs who are not using all their knowledge and skills because they are not permitted to do so. Every stroke patient is your chance to show what OT can do. This document, published in 2018, sets out what OTs are expected to do in stroke rehabilitation in Vietnam. Any OT who works with stroke patients should use this document. Any rehabilitation doctor who wants to know how to use OT can use this document to see what assessment, treatment, evaluation, and discharge functions OT can do in stroke in Vietnam. If doctors use this document for referrals, you do not need to specify techniques for the OT to do. Instead, you can refer to the OT and say, provide occupational therapy in line with the Vietnamese stroke rehabilitation guidelines for occupational therapists 2018. The doctor is therefore instructing the OT to follow this guideline and use the full range of assessment, treatment, and evaluation techniques within that guideline. The doctor will help spread evidence-based practice by instructing the OT to use this guideline. It will also lead to more efficient use of the OT in your teams because the full range and knowledge of the OT skills can be used. Rehabilitation doctors are the key to effective use of OT in their teams. This guideline provides doctors with information about what to expect from their OTs. These clinical guidelines are available in two types. One targets the health system, and the other, and this is the general guideline, and the other is profession specific. So there is a guideline for OT. As you can see on this slide, the guide is based on research evidence and where research evidence is not available, it is based on international best practice. This guide is not one size fits all. Instead, it is an aid to clinical reasoning. The OT must already understand the OT process, OT practice approaches, OT theory, and they must be able to use good clinical reasoning to identify problems, communicate and collaborate with the family and patient, set goals, and they need to have the skills to develop goal-directed and outcome-orientated treatment plans that can be evaluated. The rehabilitation guidelines must be individualized for person-centered and family-centered care, and they will need to be adapted to your local context, your local hospital, your local community, your local commune, so that they are applicable and feasible. I have reviewed these guidelines very carefully, and I think they provide a comprehensive framework for OT stroke practice anywhere in the world, but also in Vietnam. If you are working in stroke rehabilitation or you want to in the future, this guideline is your best OT resource. The guideline uses World Health Organization concepts about health, functioning, and disability as presented in the ICF. All members of the rehabilitation team should also use the ICF to ensure there is a common health language. Using the ICF, the OT will do the following. The OT will reduce impairments and increase capacity in body function and body structures. The OT will reduce limitations and increase performance in activities. The OT will reduce restrictions and increase engagement in participation. The OT will reduce barriers and increase enablers in the environment. The OT will tailor rehabilitation to individual patient factors and to the living situation, and they will understand the health condition type, severity, and exclusions. And that means they will also understand how to use the ICD-11. In the guideline, there are two parts. One is for stroke prevention. The other part is for stroke rehabilitation. Yes, it's good. Here we have the role in OT stroke prevention. In OT stroke prevention, they describe prevention as having, this is where you stop the stroke happening, and rehabilitation is where the stroke has already happened, and then the OT must treat it. Oops. The OT role in stroke prevention is important. We can work with healthy populations in community groups, or we can also work with populations that have any health condition. For example, if an OT is working in mental health, the OT can use stroke prevention strategies to be part of the healthy routine, habits, and occupation treatment. So you have mental health patients, but at the same time, you can help prevent strokes. Or if an OT is working in orthopedics, the OT can include stroke prevention as part of mobilization and home safety treatments. Because when the person is discharged, if a person has reduced obesity, increased physical activity, and better self-care, they will recover from their musculoskeletal tradition better, but they will also have less likely risk of stroke. So this means the OT can do two things at once: treat musculoskeletal and prevent stroke at the same time. We are in a unique role to do stroke preventions with all our clinical caseloads because we work with activity, routines, and habits. Okay. Oops. Okay. This is our role in stroke rehabilitation. The cycle in OT is for assessment, goal setting and planning, intervention, discharge and follow-up, same as everybody. This is the recommendation in the OT stroke guideline. I am now going to talk about each one of these steps. There is no new slide. I am just going to talk about each one now. So these phases might be done by one OT, or there might be different OTs if this stroke patient has different care cycles. Let us consider a patient who is lucky enough to receive rehabilitation in hyperacute, acute, long-term and chronic care. Stroke, then they have rehabilitation across all the cycles of care. I understand this does not happen for everyone in Vietnam. It does not happen for everyone in Australia either. It depends on where someone lives and the access to resources. In this lucky case, the patient will receive inpatient and outpatient OT rehabilitation in the hospital for maybe 3 months. The OT care cycle of assessment, goal setting, planning, intervention, and discharge will all be completed in the hyperacute, acute phase. The patient then starts long-term rehabilitation, for example, in outpatients or a community clinic. The OT cycle starts again, assessment, goal setting, planning, intervention, and discharge, but from the longer-term rehabilitation role. Each time the new cycle starts, the OT may need to use different assessments and they will need to set different goals because the activity and performance problems will change. Always, the OT will be preparing the patient and the family for life without rehabilitation. Therefore, OTs will always do patient education, family education, to increase the capacity for self-management. We will reduce the environmental barriers and we will try to help achieve activity and participation goals through remediation, adaptation, compensation, and modification. The OT needs to help the family know what to do to minimize adverse outcomes and minimize complications, as well as how to maintain the health gains achieved through rehabilitation. We do this using ADL, IADL, community, and participation activities. People are more likely to follow correct health behaviour if those behaviours are part of their everyday routine. So for most people then with chronic stroke, there is no access to rehabilitation after discharge from long-term rehabilitation. Instead, stroke survivors and families must use their own self-management techniques. OTs prepare families and patients for self-management through patient education, home programs that can be continued by the patient and the family, and they connect them to local networks that they can use. For example, if a patient can no longer access physiotherapy, the OT may instead arrange for the patient to go to the local gym or exercise park, or the OT may design ADL activities that integrate strength and balance exercises. For example, to strengthen the lower legs, the OT may say, you no longer have physio, instead, get up off your chair really slowly 10 times. Because they want to get up off the chair as daily activities, but the OT can turn that into training. So we try to think of everyday activities and how we can change it to be self-management training. Another example, if there is no chance for home modifications because there is no money, the OT can advise on ways to reorganize the existing spaces to make it safer and have a place that is safe for the stroke patient to sit, sleep, move, and see what is going on every day. The OT can help support networks built in the local communities by connecting chronic stroke survivors and their families with other chronic stroke survivors and their families. This creates connection to reduce the family burden, and it also helps the families stay resilient and strong with new friends and new activities. I have described examples of OT in each phase of rehabilitation. Now we will examine the 6 areas of practice in stroke rehabilitation that are in the Vietnamese stroke guidelines. Here are the 6 things. We will now look at each one. The first area is to understand what stroke is. OTs working in stroke rehabilitation must have expertise in neuroanatomy and the physiology of the brain to understand the mechanism of injury and the functional consequences likely to occur when different parts of the brain are damaged. OTs need to know the different types of strokes that occur and also be familiar with general information about prognosis and recovery so that they can understand the information the doctor is telling them and also so that they can help the family understand what is happening. The next area is to understand the impact of the stroke on body functions and structures and what can be done to treat these. This means the OT must know what the ICF says are body structures and functions that are commonly impacted by stroke. This can be found in the ICF core set for stroke. Very useful. The OT should know how to assess the body structures and functions for impairments, and the usual areas in the core set are cognition, perception, and physical function. I also recommend attention to mood because post-stroke depression and anxiety is very common, 30%, and it's often overlooked. The assessment should be standardized and evidence-based so they will provide accurate and sensitive baseline and change scores. Then the OT should know how to treat the problems, including remediation techniques to reduce impairment, how to maintain body function and the structure integrity, and to minimize the risk of adverse events. The third area is to understand the personal factors of the patient and how this may influence their willingness and ability to engage in rehabilitation. Rehabilitation after stroke is hard work for the patient and for the family. Demographic factors such as education, social factors such as culture and family role expectations, physiological factors such as self-perception, coping styles, and motivation will influence how you build support and strategies with the OT to collaborate with the patient to achieve safe discharge from hospital. OTs cannot change personal factors, but they can select strategies that will help people prepare for discharge as best they can. The fourth area for the OT to understand are the factors in the environment that will enable barriers or create opportunities for safe discharge and for a good quality of life at home. The ICF list of environmental factors should be consulted because it includes social, economic policy, as well as physical factors. OTs usually start with the person, where the person lives and their local environment. We usually inspect for safety, hazards, and healthy living environments. And we either do this through a home visit or we ask the family to bring in photos to show us the home or videos. And so then we can provide advice on ways to create accessible, safe spaces for the stroke survivor to sleep, sit, move, and engage with other people. OTs may look outside the home to see if a small or large change can be made to increase access and safety for stroke survivors. For example, neighbours may be asked to move items so that a clear path from the home to the road can be made so the person can get into a taxi. OTs can help patients and families to learn how to make these requests so that they do not feel trapped in their homes. The fifth area, OTs must know how to assess baseline and then improve task performance in activities of daily living in self-care, domestic and community occupations. OTs should be able to select standardized and non-standardized assessments that use self-report, observation and performance measures of activity so that we can detect limitations. The OT should conduct activity analysis to be able to identify performance requirements and environmental adjustments. And then the OT interventions will use techniques in stroke based on principles of neuroplasticity for practice and learning, compensatory techniques, adaptation and adjustment across physical, psychological, and cognitive aspects of performance. Lucky last. Since the OT, we will always remember the person exists within a living situation where their participation is expected and anticipated after they are discharged from the hospital. The person may not be doing all the roles and activities that they did before the stroke, but they will be part of a family situation where everyone will be adjusting to post-stroke life. OTs can help prepare the stroke survivors and their families to this shock, because the shock of the stroke can turn into sustained grief and trauma that their life has changed forever. OTs can help stroke survivors to use occupations to adapt and adjust to this new situation. Find out what the patient did in the past, and then the OT will suggest small or large ways that the person can participate in the family or in the community. Some survivors may want to return to work. OT can make workplace adjustments, or they can advise the manager on light duties. Some survivors may want to work in the family business. OT can advise potential risks on such things as poor executive function in cognition and therefore inability to manage money. Even if a stroke survivor does not want to be independent, he or she can do small things to help keep the family resilient. For example, he or she could feed themselves or reduce the risk of pressure sores by shifting position. The OT will be able to facilitate participation across these areas. If we do all these things, this is the scope of OT practice in stroke rehab that is in the Ministry of Health guideline. So it is approved. What does this look like in real life? Okay, let's meet Ms. Lynn. Ms. Lynn has had a stroke. She is 55 years old. She presented to the emergency department after collapsing in her home business. She could speak, but she was confused. She had pain in her left arm and difficulty moving, and she had a headache. Pathology tests were in normal range. The CT scan showed that she had occlusion in the branch of the right internal carotid artery of 40%. She had narrowing due to atherosclerosis, and she had ischemia infarction area visible in the right anterior cerebral hemisphere, but no subarachnoid hemorrhage. Medical interventions included thrombolytic therapy and antiplatelet therapy. When she was medically stable, she was reassessed, or she was assessed for stroke severity using the National Institute of Stroke Scale, NIHSS, which is 12. So this shows she has had a pretty bad stroke. On this basis, she is referred to inpatient stroke rehabilitation, where she receives a multidisciplinary stroke rehabilitation program based on the Vietnamese Stroke Guidelines 2018. In this scenario, the OT must know where the brain damage has occurred and the likely functions that have been affected. The type and severity of the stroke must also be understood, as well as evidence around the likely recovery given the predictive ability of the NIH scale, because it's good. The OT should have a good understanding of the common consequences of this type of brain damage and typical recovery patterns. Each patient will be unique, but there is ample evidence from observational longitudinal studies about the recovery sequence and the speed that this normally occurs. The OT should take note of any medical precautions and prognostic factors that the doctor thinks is very important. Then the OT will need to understand the impact on body structures and functions. So the OT needs to select assessments to detect the type and severity of the impairment. The OT usually assesses cognition, perception, physical function, and affective disorders, mood. There are hundreds of standardized assessments that the OT can use. At the moment, the Vietnamese stroke guidelines do not recommend specific tests. So this means the OT must select them. He or she may consult with the rehabilitation doctor to choose the tests that best suit the rehabilitation service. This slide shows organisations that provide information about post-stroke assessments. At the present time, most of them are in English or French or Spanish or Arabic, but in time, you will be able to translate them. The OT first interviews the patient to find out about their past activities and roles, and also what is important for them for discharge. And then after the interview, they select the assessments, because all assessments should relate to the goal that the patient wants to achieve. Otherwise, you are wasting time. The Vietnamese stroke guidelines recommend assessment of cognition, vision, perception, balance, emotional function, psychosocial issues, upper limb functions, pain, and seating. This can be done with the right assessments in about 30 minutes. So it's not too time consuming, but you need to know what you're doing. These assessments will provide the baseline measures to help goal setting and also to track progress of the time. This is why the best thing is standardized assessments. They can be self-report, observation, or performance measures. These are some examples of the assessments that we conducted with Ms. Lynn. She was evaluated with the Berg Balance Scale. The result was 43. That means she's at risk of falls when she goes home. The stops walking when talking test also showed that she had to stop to talk, and this also shows elevated fall risk. She completed the CESD scale and she was not depressed. That's good. She completed the Vietnamese version of the MOCA. She scored 20 out of 30, and that indicates mild cognitive impairment. She also did the modified neglect test battery, and she has left visual spatial neglect. And her upper limb function was assessed using the modified Ashworth scale, and she scored 1, which was the slight increase in muscle tone. She also was assessed using the ARAT, Action Research Arm Test. She scored 38, which means she's got moderate ability. So we look at, in that test, we look at grasp, pinch, grip, and gross motor. She did the 9-hole peg test and her score was 16. And so that shows we compare within the same person between the hands, and it's within the range that's acceptable. And we also did a sensory examination, and that's because we need to detect whether or not there are sensory problems. She had no problems, but she does have upper limb pain assessed using the visual analog report. So these are our body function, body structure assessments. So now what we're interested in is we have the medical record has basic information about the person's demographics, but we learn more through the patient interview. We use an occupational profile and an interview about activities that has, we learn about the patient's education, their expertise and experience in activities, how they previously coped with life changes, and we can use a standard format. The American Occupational Therapy Association has a template for this. During the rehabilitation cycle, the OT will learn more about the patient's coping styles, motivation, and self-perception, and this will help the OT individualize how the therapy is delivered and how collaborative goals for discharge are set. Most OTs do not use standardized assessments in this area, but because we're trying to get to know the person from a person-centered point of view. This is the example of a template that you can use for the life history. It is called the Occupational Profile Template. This has information relating to their history, patterns of daily living, things they found meaningful, occupations important for their health and well-being, and it's a semi-structured interview. We do this with Ms. Lynn, and we find that she is a widow. She lives with her 30-year-old daughter, son-in-law, and their 2 small children, aged 4 to 6, and her sister's son, who is 22, and is staying with them from the countryside to try and get employment. Ms. Lynn owns and has run a successful dress and tailor shop. She's done this for 20 years. She controls all the purchasing, checks the condition of fabrics, places orders to tailors and the seamstresses who make the dresses and suits. She manages all the finance. In the past 5 years, she has trained her daughter to help the customers and be the main contact person. And she's starting to train her daughter how to manage the finances and the business. She works every day except Sunday, and she enjoys being with her grandchildren and going to her favorite restaurant. She likes to walk in the park on Sunday and see her friends there. She watches television and she likes to play games on her mobile phone. After doing the occupational profile interview, we know all of this. This took about 15 minutes, not long, but we know about her life. Then we will set goals with Ms. Lynn, what she wants to do as soon as she's discharged. When can she go home? She wants to go back and be independent in ADL and to be her role as grandmother, business owner, neighbour and friend. So Ms. Lynn is proud of her business and her home. She keeps it clean, but she knows it has clutter because of the business. The OT also used the Vietnamese version of the Home Fast, developed by Professor Lynette Mackenzie, to assess the risks to injury, and many were identified. In addition, the OT inspected the street outside her home. There were barriers to movement, such as hazards for slips, trips, and falls. The OT spoke with the neighbours to ask if they would move their motorbike off the path when Mrs. Ning wanted to move, and also to go to her restaurant or to use the park or the car. They suggested that Ms. Lin's daughter tell them the night before so that they could move their motorbike and put it back when it was needed. She could also call the neighbours when Ms. Lin was coming home so they were ready to move the motorbike and put it back. Otherwise, Ms. Lin is trapped in the house. The OT also asked the daughter to take photos of the favourite restaurant to help teach Ms. Lin and the daughter how to identify environmental hazards, the slips, trips and falls, and the unstable seating. Patient education about how to prepare environments for safe use is an important part of OT. She also cleared the storage from the bathroom so that Ms. Lin has easy access to the toilet with a non-slip mat. This part of stroke rehabilitation cycle uses information from the occupational profile and the assessment of body structures and functions. The OT will set goals with the patient and the family so that rehabilitation can prioritise the core activities needed for safe discharge, as well as the occupations that were meaningful. In the American OT practice framework, this is called occupational performance analysis. Many different assessments can be used, but always activity analysis is essential. Every core and goal activity to identify task performance requirements must be analysed. Training, compensatory techniques, including equipment, remediation and adaptation techniques, are used to increase capacity and reduce performance limitations. Almost always, the OT will need to explore whether there are past habits, past routines or objects that relate to the activity so that the rehabilitation will be consistent with the patient values and preferences. We know that people engage with rehabilitation better if the training, practice and instruction is individualised and the performance is contextualised. So ADL intervention may involve prescription of equipment, training in the use, hands-on treatment for spasticity management of upper limb, using ADL activities for motor relearning, repetition, training in fall prevention, adapting ways of performing a task, or using external cues for cognitive impairment. For example, Ms. Lin will need to scan across her visual field before moving her body to reduce injury and falls because she has the hemispatial neglect. She could practice scanning forth in her bed, but the practice will be more effective and she will learn why it is necessary if the OT sets up an obstacle course in the gym or in the ward and then grades the difficulty of the scanning task so that she's ready to go home, scanning, practicing in the street and scanning, practicing at home. Ms. Lin will need to adapt her self-care routines in her home shop because she can no longer run up and down the stairs or complete the fine motor tasks linked to material selection for customers, and she has mild cognitive impairment. The family did not cook much, but Ms. Lin may need to cease cooking altogether because it is too hazardous for her to use a cooker on the street, and with her visual problems in spatial neglect, there's a risk of falls, balance problems, cognitive impairment and burns. So her capacity will improve with practice and the OT may prescribe routines, but the OT helps the family decide what she will stop doing as well as what she will do differently. Whoops. Ms. Lin wants to return to her home shop to manage her business, care for her grandchildren, see her customers, talk with neighbours, and do her community routines of going to the restaurant, going to the park, seeing her friends and being part of the community. The OT estimates that the core ADL and community activities will be achievable if Ms. Lin implements the strategies learned in rehabilitation and she continues to practice the techniques to compensate adapt, retain and build resilience in her body and in her performance. Ms. Lynn will be safe in the community and able to complete her occupations important to her as grandmother, shop owner and business. She will, however, have problems relating to the management of the business because of the MCI, cognitive impairment. The adverse impacts of poor decisions or mistakes in purchasing, sending work out to tailors, looking after financial matters, it's too risky. So the OT needs to facilitate the family meeting, the family conversation to discuss how this important role will be changed, will be managed in the future. Ms. Lynn has already started teaching her daughter how to manage the business, so the OT may need to provide Ms. Lynn with evidence of her cognitive problems to show that it is a good idea for the daughter to do this. Okay. So the OT can emphasize instead that Ms. Lynn does other things in the business more. For example, customer relations, maintaining good relations with neighbors and so on. In this way, OT will be maximizing Ms. Lynn's participation in activities at the same time as supporting post-stroke adaptation. So here we have the OT assessment, goal setting, planning, treatment and discharge program was completed and it was a success. Ms. Lynn was discharged from inpatient rehabilitation. She achieved her goals to be independent in ADL and to engage in IADLs that relate to her role as a neighbour, friend and business owner. Based on her impairments, her home shop and priority areas like the restaurant were adapted so that we could reduce risks. In addition, she gave up 2 occupations where we could not manage the risk. These were cooking and the financial management of the business. Ms. Lynn and her daughter learnt skills so they could self-manage at home to understand and manage the consequences of the stroke and continue recovery even though there's no more rehabilitation. Now, other people may say, oh, this is all common sense. OT is just common sense. Well, actually, the family could not work this out on their own. Most people after stroke are in shock, and the complexity of the biological and social consequences means that most people are not able to understand the functional problems or their causes, so they do not know how to safely adapt. So some people may say, oh, discharge, and they'll work it out. Common sense. But actually, most people are really afraid and they are uncertain and they will restrict what they do, which, as we know, will lead to more complications. So this is why you need OT. OT may look like common sense, but it is complex problem solving in everyday life. We can accelerate safe discharge, and we can give patients the tools and techniques for stroke self-management. Now, since 200,000 people in Vietnam have a stroke each year, it's important we prepare them for life after stroke and for life after hospital that is safe, meaningful, and self-managed. We must do this for Vietnam. Last slide. So how do we do this? Easy. You have the rules. This is the guideline. You just need to do the guideline. If you are a doctor, you refer and say, OT, please do OT practice according to the guideline. Off you go. If you are an OT, you must look at this guideline and think about the other elements I talked about, and then you will be able to do it. I am very happy for everyone to have a copy of these slides, and I'm sure it will be available on the OT Vietnam site so that you can think about this if you treat stroke patients. Thank you all for listening.
Cảm ơn giáo sư tiến sĩ Ann Kusick đã có
Thank you so much, Professor Dr. Ann Kusick. Very interesting and very thorough presentation about the role and the contribution of OT in the rehabilitation of stroke patients. So this morning, we have listened to 4 presentations from our international experts, the most recent one by Professor Ann. We've now have heard about the meaning, the importance, roles of OT in life and for the particular health needs of patients. And we've also have just learned a very interesting case studies of Miss Lynn, a stroke patient. In the remaining time that we have in this conference, this is pretty much the topics, the kind of topics and the discussions that we will have. We will share together. We will update each other about the understanding and some of the new knowledge findings of OT. And also we'll be hearing a lot of case studies from different institutions about the applications of OT. So with great honor, I'd like to introduce the next presentation from BOT Nguyễn Phú Sĩ from Bach Mai Hospital. They have one of the most diverse and effective center that is bringing in OT in rehabilitation. Well, BOT Nguyễn Phú Sĩ graduated from the Hải Dương Technical Medical University. He belongs to the first cohort of OTs in Vietnam, the very first batch of qualified OTs in Vietnam, and as they carry with them very important mission. So please welcome BOT Nguyễn Phú Sĩ. Good morning, distinguished guests, sponsors, colleagues, and to all of you here at the conference today. So as assigned by the organizers, I'm here to share with you about our practice at Bach Mai Hospital in Hanoi, about occupational therapy intervention at our rehabilitation center. There will be 3 parts in my presentation. First part is an introduction about the rehabilitation center of Bach Mai Hospital. Second part, I will talk about OT interventions at my hospital. And the third one, I will give you some of the examples, some photos of our patients and our activities at Bach Mai Hospital. Our center at Bach Mai Hospital, we now have 44 people in our team, including 8 doctors. We have 2 associate professor doctors, 14 nurses, and 15 OT. We have 1 master degree holder and 14 bachelor degree holder. We have 2 physio, 3 technicians for speech therapy, and also 2 technicians for orthopedics rehabilitation. And we're led now by our director, Professor Lương Tuấn Khanh. We have 98 inpatient beds and 6 beds for daycare. And also we're receiving a lot of outpatients. In a survey we conducted in 2022, stroke patients account for 52%. We also have patients with head trauma, injuries, 15%, patients with spine injuries, another 28%, and other injuries, joints and orthopedic injuries, make up the other 5%. So all of our units are now operating independently. We have physio, OT, speech therapy, orthopedic equipment, and assistive technology. So the subunit of assisting technology is fairly new. They were established end of 2019. We also have the genital urinary unit, and function exploration. We have structured our center into the very specific expertise, which with the support of HI, we establish, first of all, a spine center, and then we try to look at it in a more patient-centric point of view. And that's why we have these groups of expertise: nursing, doctor, physio, OT, speech therapy, assisting technology, and orthopedics. So we work together and always share the same approach of being patient-centric. At our center right now, every week, we will make rounds on Tuesday morning together. And OT is actually a multidisciplinary expertise. So we work together with other groups of physio, of speech therapists, etc., to help patients in a more holistic way. When it comes to OT intervention at our rehab center, we're working mostly with the elders, adults, and old people. So we designed this assessment template so that we can use this for our preliminary assessment of the patient. And the majority of patients at our center are receiving services from OT. We work mostly with adults. So right now, we can give intervention with the 5 focuses. First of all, cognitive. Second is upper extremity. 3, ADL, daily activities. Number 4 is splints and adaptive devices, for example, for hand function. And number 5 is group activities. For cognitive intervention, we work with patients that have had injuries. And we also are using one of the very popular assessment tool, which is the MOCA. We're using MMSE, the Mini Mental State Examination, and the Behavioral Inattention Test, BIT, developed by Professor Tanemura in Japan. As for our intervention, we have tools like pictures, paintings, assessment tests, virtual reality machines to help with cognitive assessment. We're also using apps and softwares on iPad, other mobile devices, and other ADL activities interventions. The second category of interventions that we provide at our center is for upper extremity intervention. So we're using the tools, some of the tools to evaluate the upper extremity functions, such as the ARAT test, box and block test, the 9-hole pack test, staff assessment, and the brainstorm approach assessment. Here are some of the photos, some examples of upper extremity intervention at our center using the tools that I've just mentioned. We have studied some of the structure and diagram for upper extremity intervention and some guidelines and best practices in the world. We also are applying the constraint-induced movement therapy, CIMT, mirror therapy, virtual reality. We're also using RTMS, repetitive transcranial magnetic stimulation, transcranial direct current stimulation, and functional electrical stimulation. Here are some photos. There are also non-invasive intervention, applying the direct current or electrical stimulation. This is the photos, some photos of virtual reality therapy. We are having 5 devices supplied by an Austrian manufacturer, which help with both cognitive and upper extremity interventions. We have some of the equipments that help us with upper extremity intervention. We participated in a training course recently organized by the University of Medicine of Hanoi and Kobe University of Japan. And Kobe University gave us funding to purchase some of these equipments. So we're pretty well equipped right now for upper extremity intervention. The next category is activities of daily living, ADLs. And because of the uniqueness of our center, we are part of Bach Mai General Hospital in Hanoi. So we work with a lot of acute patients, actually, post-stroke patients with neurological injuries. So our interventions tap in right away with the very critical daily activities like eating, brushing, washing, personal hygiene, dressing, and mobility. Some photos of our ADLs intervention. We receive some sponsorship and funding from international organization, and they help us build up this ADL room. So which and in this area, there's a kitchen, bedroom, living room, dining table, etc. So when patients work with us here, we can simulate that for them and help them familiarize themselves again with the daily activities. I'd like to share a little bit about some of our design and the current facility we have for the bathroom and toilet. So we took reference to some of the recommendations of the Kobe University and another partner from Thailand. So we went into the specifics for the sizes, the appropriate height that it should be for the bars and for all of the laboratory equipment. So this is some of the photos from our recent activities using these bathroom and toilet. So we help patients and we monitor their mobility to see if they can move from the bedroom to the toilet comfortably and easily, or what kind of help they would need so that they will have the strategies and the appropriate movements and training that they needed to come back to these daily activities. Another categories of service that we offer is splints and adaptive devices. So this cupboard right here is a display, but is also are the tools and the devices that we can offer to students. So these can be easily found in the market. They can purchase by themselves. They can buy these from shops in the market. So this is a display for us to recommend and demonstrate to them how these devices, how these tools could help them. For example, this patient right here, we introduce a wheelchair tray, which would really help patients to be able to eat, to be able to do their personal hygiene by themselves while on a wheelchair. We also introduce some ideas how we could innovate a little bit, invent handmade tools easily done at home that would help them in their daily activities. So for example, these spoon for a patient with hand injury. And we work with an institute in Japan for what they call the smart plastic devices to help with patients with eating. And we can provide this for free as well at our center. The last category of service that I like to introduce to you is group therapy, group intervention. And it's twice a week right now at our hospital. We bring in art classes for them. They can try with coloring or making handmade greeting cards, doing some of the craft work for Christmas. We cook together. In this photo, they're making the Vietnamese spring rolls together. So in conclusion, I would like to very honestly share with you the strengths, some of our strengths and weaknesses. It's pretty much like a self-evaluation for ourselves. Right now, I think the strengths, one of the pros for us is we are able to provide comprehensive interventions for patients. We also have modern equipment and tools. We have already brought in multidisciplinary approach, and our team is already a multidisciplinary team. But some of the weaknesses and the gaps right now is that we still lack high quality human resources. We need more OTs. We need more qualified OTs, people with bachelor degrees in OT. We hope to recruit from the upcoming cohort that will be graduating in the next few years. And we have a large number of patients, actually. Right now, one therapist can give service to 20 to 25 patients, and it's still really high number for one therapist to be able to handle and cater to. So my last message is I'd like to extend an invitation to all of you. Please pay it a visit. If it's convenient for you, if you're in Hanoi, we'd love to hear your input and your comments. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you. OT, BOT Nguyễn Phú Sĩ. You know, Mr. Sĩ was the class monitor. He was actually the prefect of the very first class of OT in Vietnam, graduated in 2019. And he's so mature now. I would like to congratulate and encourage him. He's thriving, leading the OT activities, leading the OT intervention at his rehabilitation center in Bach Mai Hospital. And I would highly recommend Bach Mai Hospital. If you want to have placements, you have practical internship for your students, consider sending them to Bach Mai Hospital. So that is the end of our presentations in the morning. We started a little late this morning, and we're a little bit out of time right now. So if you don't mind, maybe we will have a longer discussion session in the afternoon, but we do have a few minutes for Q&As, very quick Q&As. Is there any burning questions? We do have time for maybe 1 to 2 questions before lunch break. Do you have any questions? Do you have any questions from the floor, please? Is there a hand? Is there a hand raising? Yeah, well, when we're talking OT here, right? It's lunchtime. Maybe it's not really the best timing to have any further questions. So thank you very much once again to our speakers, to all of the delegates, participants. Thank you very much for your attention, for participating with us this morning. And I'll hand it over to the MC and the organizer for lunch announcement. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We're going to take a lunch break right now. Our afternoon session will start at 1:30. Organizers are providing lunch to all of you in the new building of this campus. So it is a 15-story building right in the campus here, and we will divide into 2 groups on the 15th and the 14th floor. Enjoy your lunch, and we'll see you all back here at 1:30. Thank you.